RugbyRenegade.com, the #1 online strength and conditioning program for rugby. Are you ready to get bigger, stronger, fitter, and faster and dominate your opposition? Welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast, where we build machines.
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Pro Athlete Supplementation. Check them out at pas-nutrition.co.uk for all your supplementation needs. And don't forget that subscribers to the Rugby Renegade program get a 40% discount on retail prices.
Yes, we're back with episode 53 of the Rugby Renegade Podcast. My name is Jamie Bain, and today I interview consultant strength and conditioning coach Sam Portland. Sam's currently working with Kenya Sevens and has experience with Wasps and Ealing. I have great discussion with him about a few different topics, touched on a lot about speed development. That's something he's passionate about. And he's got a workshop coming up soon, so make sure you listen all the way to the end so you hear details about that. Give it a listen and let us know what you think. Hi Sam, welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. Great to have you on. Why don't we start with you just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into strength and conditioning, and who you've worked with.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it. It's always good to talk shop. In terms of, my career background, that classic dream of wanting to be a professional rugby player, was doing everything I could do, broke my leg when I was sort of in a position where I was being looked at from a distance by clubs, and sort of had to renegotiate what I was doing. Ended up going to uni, sort of fast forward, back playing semi-pro rugby. And then in 2012, there was a tweet that went out by Guadango, just said, anyone in the UK, there's a top coach coming to England, you need to go and check this guy out. And in my time at uni, I'd been following like Zach Evans, Joe DeFranco, the guys. And the guy that was coming to the UK was actually James Smith, the thinker. Yeah. And funnily enough, he was only coaching the son of Wasps owner at the time, which was only 20 minutes in the car from my house. So it was crazy. So I rocked up. I was like, sweet. I emailed him, not really knowing what I was walking into. 2 weeks later, I was there every day and realised like my mind had been absolutely blown. He's an incredible academic coach, and I then applied for an internship at Wasps. And it's funny how things work, because the reason why James ended up in the country was through Keir Wenham-Flatt, who was the head of Academy S&C at the time at Wasps, through their connections in America. And James gave me a reference, and then from there, he coached me through my assessments and got my internship at Wasps. Started off in the academy, got fast tracked. People moved on and ended up with the first team, doing all the sports science, return to play stuff with the first team. Bounced on when they went to Coventry and took a role with Ealing Trailfinders, and just continued to build the speed development, power development program there, sort of just bringing, because obviously in the championship, my office was the referee's changing room at the time, so they expanded quite quick, because you're aware of sort of the growth. I came in just the year that they just survived relegation, and then we all came in that summer. And then from there, and in and around that, I'd sort of always worked for myself. I started as a PT whilst through uni, so I was always sort of trying to earn my own pocket money. And within that, it gave me opportunities to work in track and field, because at uni I was coaching people for free. And, it just opens doors for you, doesn't it, really? So I was consulting with different people then, and then fast forward at Christmas last year, got an opportunity to work with English-based NFL player named Alex Gray. So did all of his off-season with him. Have been sort of expanding my online profile and online remote coaching, and I'm now doing some active consulting with the Kenyan Rugby Union to just pick them up for the last 2 series of their sevens tour. And, you know, coaching, because it's off-season, coaching professionals in parks at the moment, you know, working on their speed and just doing a few other bits and pieces with them there. So just keeping fingers in a lot of pies, really, mate. That's pretty much the fast-forward version of 10 years.
Yeah, that sounds cool. So let's talk a bit more about your work with Kenya Sevens. What was your first impression when you saw them, and what sort of work you've been doing with them?
Okay, so this is really interesting again, and it just proves, you know, for me, I believe that, you know, if you do good work and you're nice to people, things sort of come your way. You know, Buddhists call it karma, but I think how it all came about is that I got a phone call from their liaison officer. His name's Tyrone Sterry, and he would kill me if I didn't plug him, because he used to coach me when I was like 12. Taught me how to tackle, because I was a winger, couldn't tackle, skinny, fast, couldn't catch. So there you go, mate, you're on the wing. And he basically, ever since then, we've always kept close. He's kind of like a surrogate uncle sort of thing to me. And he was their liaison officer. So he called me up and said, Sam, listen, they've travelled over and they don't have an S&C coach. Would you mind, you know, helping out? I've spoke to him about you. I know your position. Do you want to do it? And I was like, absolutely, more than happy to do so. Obviously, I had to have a meeting with the head coaches and bits and pieces and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. But then when I rocked up for their captain's run before London, and it was really, really interesting because, you know, for me, having worked in, you know, say, for instance, at Wasps, where you've got an abundance of resources and everything like that, to then meeting these guys, it was really interesting because it's clear, obviously, they come from Kenya. You know, there's not a great deal of wealth, relatively speaking, but their whole approach to, the way that they play, their relationship with the coaches, their relationship with each other, and their immediate relationship to me was extremely humbling. They were very, very coachable. They were, obviously there was some of the lads' English wasn't as good as the others, so there were a few language barriers. So with some of the stuff that I did, I had to change the way I coached. You know, I pride myself being a demo expert, so copy me goes a long way. They just responded really, really well to everything I gave them. And, you know, some of these guys have jobs back home in Kenya that they do in between tournaments and stuff. So they've got a real high level of appreciation of where they are and what they're doing. You know, for instance, some of the lads on the tour this year, the first time they went on an aeroplane was coming on the HSBC 7 Series. Wow. So that's the type of person I'm dealing with.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And then talking about kind of what you've done with them, I've seen a bit on social media of kind of the speed work you're doing. Might be a good time to sort of discuss your philosophy on speed development and training.
Yeah, so I think coming in, obviously, you know, there was 14 or so lads that I didn't know, and you know, I wanted to make sure that I was ticking all the right boxes with them. You know, appropriate warm-ups on captain's run and in the matches, and just being able to deliver them just the most appropriate dose that they needed at the time. Obviously, we couldn't spend time going through mechanics and bits and pieces, so we did a lot of games. We created a lot of games that required, you know, there's the one where they're just dodging in and out of each other on the Instagram. I just call that Indiana Jones. And they're, you know, it's you know the reference, don't you? You've seen films. There's going to be some people listening to this going, who the fuck is Indiana Jones? And within that drill, you've basically got people shuttling forward and back across the 5 metre channel at varying speeds. And we open it up for varying widths. And we treat it just so the explanation of that drill is just extensive change of direction. And obviously, you know, how many the amount of time, especially if we change the direction and then applied speed mechanics to that, timing is the thing that makes the difference. Obviously you've got the reactive element of agility, but then obviously you've got change of direction and being able to adjust and if you were to take it and apply it to track and field with hurdling, let's say like spotting the hurdle, so it's all understanding your distance, your timing, your spacing to where you are relative to the task that you've got to negotiate, and then you've got to pick the right tool for it. So for me, especially with those guys straight away and on captain's run, we weren't going to be running max sprints. I'd never met them before. So I was like, right, let's have some fun and let me see as a coach, let me see what they're capable of. So we just slowed it down, got them to, you just got to pick the right tool to negotiate. And some of them were very, very good at change of direction. Obviously, they're competing on the world stage. And it creates a fun out of failing with it as well, because you end up just bumping into your mate like bumper cars. So if you were to sort of bring that into sort of my sort of quote unquote philosophy and ideas around developing speed, is I was very fortunate that before Altis was Altis, it was the World Athletics Centre, and I went over there with a friend of mine, colleague at the time. And we ended up, we were there with it for a week. And there was a couple of things that really just stuck out. And, I was like a fly around shit to Dan Pfaff, and just watching him, listening to him. And there's a couple of things that he just sort of really said is like, if it looks shit slow, it's going to be shit fast. And for me, that really resonated, especially with team sport athletes, because within speed, we have this inherent nature to try and, because it's called speed, to run fast. And, I've developed this sort of firm belief that you've got to really earn the right to run fast. And earning the right to run fast is to be able to establish and master those fundamental positions in a closed to open continuum, applying fundamental skill acquisition or like general motor programming, increasing. So I stole it off Nick Winkleman as well when we were out there. He had a coach like a caveman presentation, it was really good. And it was when he talked about speed within it, it was just like its positions, patterns, power. So for me, you take that concept and you can apply that to everything from even a long-term athletic development point of view. That if you can't master the positions, then how are you going to apply rhythm, timing, and tempo to it, and then increase velocity, because it's going to break down. And for me, like the art of coaching speed and the development of speed is you're only solving the problem of the speed that your technique allows you to achieve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And we do it in the gym, don't we? You don't chuck a lot of weight on someone if they've got poor squat or deadlift technique. They've got, like I say, they've got to earn the right to do it, and the intensity in speed development is that doing it faster. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and then we get, within that, I always talk about, and I'm lucky I've had a few conversations with Jonas, and I took Alex Gray over to Speedworks with Marvin, who's the guy based out of London for Speedworks. And, we always talk about solving problems at the hertz that they're moving at. So, for instance, it's the same old, stuff. It's like everyone read the book Legacy, and then everyone was sweeping the sheds.
Yeah.
And you sort of apply that sort of stuff to the idea of coaching. It's like I can watch Usain Bolt, or I can watch CJ Uja, or I can watch Reece Prescott and talk to those coaches, or even Dom Ashwell, who run the men's indoor seniors. He's running like 10.2 at like 18 or something. And they're solving 11 meters per second problems within their coaching. Whereas in rugby, you'd be lucky within an elite professional to be solving 10 meters per second problems. And the difference there from 10, 11 to 12 meters per second is, for me, is huge in terms of what coaching you're delivering and the load. And then obviously it goes into step load, because obviously every step is a rep. And then the fatigue element of every step load. And, you've got this whole realm of problems that just running fast can't take care of.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Really interesting. Now, this is a question we ask all the guests on the podcast, and it's: what is the biggest mistake rugby players make when it comes to strength and conditioning?
Fucking hell. Reading James Haskell's book? No.
Best answer yet so far.
Right. The biggest mistake that rugby players make, or rugby strength and conditioning coaches?
Rugby players.
That they can't see the bigger picture. And that I mean that they associate fatigue with development. So, it's kind of, and then that's inherent with, it goes into the philosophies of coaches and the games and previous experience and stuff like that. But for me, appreciating what good work is and what quality is, and also the one thing that I've found, especially with a lot of my guys that I've worked with over the years, is that undervalue a good warm-up. Like from my experience with track and field, if you'll know this yourself, is like you speak to the coach, like, right, you got 6 minutes to warm a player up. Like if you take them through a progressive warm-up, they will be absolutely blowing. They'll be absolutely like, everything could be turned on, everything could be working, and they'll realize like how far off they really are in terms of physical development. Just because they think that that they can just rock up and just crack on,
Yeah, definitely. Now, again, I'm stealing from your social media a bit, but I saw a post where you're talking about kind of pitfalls of what people call high performance, and a few of your points kind of resonate with me. So I just wanted you to kind of elaborate on those a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I'll let me pull it up now, because that was a really interesting. That post came out of a lot of reflection, and obviously because I'm in a position now where I'm working for myself, so I wouldn't be wise to sack myself. So I can be a little bit more vocal with some of my opinions, and it just became quite a reflective practice exercise, really. And I mean, I can roll through it. The big one for me, is like when we stop thinking we can actually control what we want the outcome to be and start believing in our ability, then things become more certain. That for me comes through the incessant nature of control of coaches. Like we believe, and this is talking about technical coaches as well as S&C coaches, for me, there's this problem that we find that we believe that just because we rep a pattern, we rep a structure, we rep, an organization of a drill or whatever, that we can actually control what happens in the sporting arena. And within that, we then start creating excessive stress and over arousal to that situation. It's like, in a game, we've got a 5-phase move with an expectation of something to happen. Well, what if they don't do what you think they're going to do? You're limiting yourself to the ability to actually make a true decision. And within that, I find that because there's a lot of like focus on sort of external stimulus, what the opposition do. We're going to do what we do to make sure the opposition do this. It's still focused around the opposition, and it is more into sort of like the tactical element. But then when you go in for like the S&C side of coaching things, and when you start actually like just really truly believing in yourself and your abilities, then everything else just becomes tertiary to it and secondary to it. Because at the end of the day, if you go out and just focus on what you can control and what you've done, then it doesn't actually matter if you win or lose or draw or succeed or fail, because your inherent process in you and your belief and your thought process towards that belief structure is the thing that's the most powerful thing that you can do. And that's why, that kind of like set off that whole post. With regards to technology, I did it when I was young. I was looking at GPS, I was looking at RPEs, and I was like, that's the thing that's guiding my coaching. It really isn't. It just means that I can point the bow and keep pointing the bow in the right direction. There's only a few numbers that I really, truly care about, and that's PBs and signing bonuses, and that's kind of what you're trying to achieve with technology, is just pushing people to develop themselves in the right direction, so you're just keeping safe. I think the big one for me on this post was the professionalism comment. And for those who've not read it, basically professionalism, aka the way in which an organisation inflicts control on its members, shackling their true ability and spirit. Within a large amount of people, the collective identity is a hybrid of faces, and however many single words you use that summarise your culture means nothing. I'm a firm believer that when something becomes everything, it becomes nothing. In the organisations where it means everything, you lose the human touch, and the revolving door spins on short-term stints at clubs. So within that, if you take something of value, right? You take something of value and then it has appeal, and you're drawn to that thing because of its appeal. So, I always use the example, and I talk to a few players about this, and I've had it myself when I've gone and played. Your first session back from pre-season is probably your best season ever, your best session ever. Your skills are good, you're moving well, everything's great. And then it goes back into that control, and goes back into that whole idea of, we're going to create this identity for us because this is our game, this is what we do, this is how we do things, when really you start neglecting the reason why you do them in the first place. So you have this case with a lot, and I feel sorry for some players that this happens to, is a club signs a player, right? Sign a player based on their ability to do something, and then they coach that ability out of them. Classic example, someone who faces a lot of criticism, for instance, is Danny Cipriani. He's a true maverick in the way that he plays. And is it his fault that causes problems for the people around him? Or are the people around him too engrossed in what we would call structure that they can't perform? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I'm sort of going on a big one here, but and within groups, and this is like, you must have been on a rugby social, right? Yeah. So being a rugby man yourself, or any team, anyone's listening there, right? You've been in a group and you've gone out, and when you go out with a group, it's awesome because everything, fucking everything, stories are created that are fantastic. However, what you do is you do see the different faces of people, and you see, after a few drinks, certain people migrate to each other. You get the guys that go home early, you get the guys that don't come home, you get the guys that end up at the strippers and the ones that end up at KFC, right? And that's where, that example in itself, as crude as it is, shows you exactly the reason why you cannot create a successful sporting organisation when you try and put everyone under the same umbrella.
Yeah. No, I've seen it where people have tried to, like say, they've got this preconceived idea of what they want the culture to be, and you look at these, really successful clubs, over the years, whether Sarries or Leicester, and go, they've got a really good culture, and then I guess, like you say, with the sweeping the sheds thing, everyone tries to kind of copy that culture, and it's not going well. What are we good at? What traits have our players got, and kind of let it almost happen naturally, if you know what I mean. Everyone tries to be the next Saracens, the next next Leicester, and it doesn't quite work, and that's why it's kind of, I think some of the best things that I've been involved in team environments are where those things have just naturally progressed.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think Alex Good got a phone call from his head coach after he'd been on the piss for 4 days in his rugby kit and told him off?
No.
I'd like to think he had a wash and maybe put another kit back on. That's fine. I'd be like, listen, mate, the kit man needs his shirt back. Like, crack on. And that proves a point. And that got so much hatred. Got so much stick. It's like, fucking hell, the bloke's a human. He wants to have a beer and go on a bender. It's not a problem. He's not hurting you.
Yeah.
It's not hurting anyone. And that's how their sort of quote unquote culture evolves. You call these. They're trying to pick the best things out of everything and try and put it all into one without actually having a human interaction with the people that are there. What do your players want? What do you want? And how do you frame that? Because it's only going to crack. You can't. It's non-sustainable. And then going like, right, it's going to be pressure. We're going to have pride. We're going to have this. We're going to have that. Listen, no, you're not, because it's not going to work. You're enforcing different ideologies on people that it's just not gonna be the same. Elite sportsmen are good at sport, and however they operate, they're just human beings.
Yeah, and often forgotten. You think everyone can be moulded to the ideal player, but everyone's got to be treated differently. So some great points there.
And then when I went into with the Kenyans and like that was it was possibly the most enriching coaching experience I've had. It was fantastic, and I can't speak highly enough of the guys, and I'm really looking forward to going out there and doing some more work with them. Their culture of their team is indicative of the culture of their country. So it wasn't the head coach saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we act like this. Now we're just Kenyans. Before we went out to play Wales in France, they had the boombox on and they were singing and dancing. They had to win that game to keep their jobs for the next year, to stay in the series. Like, if you were in an English changing room, you'd be having a 30-minute meeting.
Yeah.
Their inherent belief, it goes back into, they just believed in themselves. They'd done all the work. And it just comes down to making that decision. And I'm there on the touchline. I'm going fucking bonkers. I'm beaming, I'm shouting because I just really wanted to do well. And you look over, and the head coach is calm as anything because he knows. And I think this is a huge respect for any sort of head coach or any sort of coaching, anyone that's doing anything where competition's involved, is that when that player crosses the line and that whistle starts, it's not really a lot you can do.
Yeah.
And because you as a coach and as a preparation specialist to that sport is to allow your players and the people that you work with to make the decisions, not what you've told them to do, but to make the decisions when it all goes wrong.
Yeah. I think it was it Mike Tyson who said everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face.
Yeah.
And it goes back to your very first point in that post. It's and overcoach is often a term you hear in terms of the technical side of things, that it kind of almost coach out the raw instinct in them. And sometimes I've been in environments where players have been punished for doing something instinctive that was very good, but it went away from the original structure that was prescribed.
Yeah, and stick to the plan. Yeah. Listen, mate, did it work? Yes, then shut up.
Yeah, and which is bizarre because ultimately coaches defined by the results. So surely they should be encouraging whatever gets good results.
And it does. It goes back into that control. It's like, oh my God, I can't have a player that doesn't do what I tell him to.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't do what you tell him to do because he may see things a little bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Get lots of hours talking about it. Again, another question we have that is a regular for our guests. What advice would you give to an upcoming strength coach?
Coach for free. Don't worry about the money. The reality of the industry is that you're never going to get paid millions, and you do it because you want to do it. I didn't take a penny for the 2 bits and pieces I did in Kenya. They didn't pay me for it. I did it because I wanted to do it, because I wanted to get the experience. Obviously, that changes off the back of, those 2 tournaments. However, I paid for my own flight to Paris because I wanted to coach those players and get better. Everyone sort of complains about internships and complains about, I've got to work for free. I've got a youth development group, which I try and bring coaches in. It's only an hour a week. I can't get one. I can't get a young coach that wants to come and coach for free for an hour a week. It's get your head in the sand. Like when I started, I was lucky, like that story. I for every day for 2 weeks, I sat in a corner of a room asking James Smith questions whilst he was coaching an individual, and that 2 weeks in itself changed my career.
Yeah. And also, while we're kind of talking about coach development, perhaps give us an insight into the way you're working in terms of consultancy, because everyone sort of is drawn to working, with a team, but there's a lot more opportunities coming as a consultant. So maybe have a little discussion of that.
Yeah. So it's funny how things go. The industry is the industry, isn't it? And it's the Jekyll and Hyde of elite sport. But when you get to a point where I realised that, I could do a lot more with what I'm doing. Like I had, everyone's got a side hustle, because, I was coaching people that won the World Cup on £18,000 a year. So you've got to work to get more money. So having always sort of done that, it got to the point where, I was having to turn people away. Someone contacted me about helping them rehab their ACL, and I had to turn it away. And I was like, there is a much bigger picture and a bigger world to this. Obviously, working with the elite sport and stuff, it's an ego stroke. It really is. And I would be lying if I didn't admit that. Like, I like telling people I've worked with the level of people that I have, and they've been successful. However, I want to work with the ones that want it the most. And then that's when you get really enriching experiences, whether that's online through our remote programming stuff, or one-to-one bits and pieces that way. Because I do think that the industry is opening up. It will follow. I think it's going to follow the American models a little bit more so. Because part of me feels that the industry, the market, supply and demand, coaching prices aren't going to go up because there's more and more coaches coming through, but then they're going to seek different opportunities and different avenues for coaches to do well. And I just thought at that time, I had a very good opportunity, so I jumped 2 feet in, and I'm not looking back. I want to see more parts of the world. I want to work with different organisations. I want to work with different sports, just to sort of enrich that whole coaching experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you benefit a lot. Obviously, it's great working in sports, a great environment. But like I say, in reality, you kind of need to do something else. But not just from a financial perspective, from the experience of working with different populations, different environments, and things like that. It's a lot more rewarding. So.
One of my first clients was my mum, right? And that was the most eye-opening coaching experience of my life.
Yeah. Like
first time walking into professional rugby gym, that was a walk in the park with trying to coach my mum. I was terrified. Like, as you can imagine, like those, and especially this is the thing that some people, that they may not be adverse to, is like, just because you've got so-and-so on your CV or whatever you've done, when you're in that consultancy world, and you're working with, like, it could be just your mate, but your mate's forking out of his own pocket for you to coach him, that he works hard for that money. It's not some investor that the player in a club never pays you directly. If you're in the club, so your responsibility to that person is even greater. It's not less just because he doesn't walk out in the Premiership every week. It's actually higher.
Yeah, definitely a good way of looking at it. And now, again, coach development, any sort of books or resources that you'd recommend for developing coaches?
Yeah, so I'm on my desk here, and the books that I have got, Super Training, The Governing Dynamics of Coaching by James Smith, Applied Sprint Training by James Smith, Special Strength Training Manual for Coaches, The Science of Running, Ultimate MMA Conditioning, DB Hammer's The Best Sports Training Book Ever. I don't know if you can actually get that anymore.
Yeah, I've heard of DB Hammer. I think I've read a few of these things online, but never seen the book.
Yeah, it's all about nervous system manipulation, and it's pretty cool. And The Mechanics of Sprinting and Hurdling by Ralph Mann. And also, not to mention my main man Joel Smith, who's just released his book, and that's really good. The Science of Sprinting, I think it's called. But yeah, those are the sort of the books that I've got. And listen, Jamie, like, mate, I'm dyslexic, like, so I don't read a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Like I say, I've got these books. I go back to these books when I've got to solve a problem.
Yeah.
So my coaching directs my reading. I'm not one of those coaches that can recite research like it's gospel. I've got better things to be doing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's like, when I first started listening to podcasts and people say, I read this book, I read this. It's like, well, listen, mate, what else do you fucking do? Do you actually coach? You're reading all the time? Like, you know, they're very much reference text. They're very, very much reference text. I learn more from my athletes than I do out of the books. Yeah. It just bridges the gap for me. And listening to podcasts, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it, because sometimes if you kind of, you know, force yourself just to read through it, you know, how much of it do you actually retain? Whereas if you're going to look at it with, you know, actual problem in mind of solving it, you know, you'll take in, you know, that little bit more, and obviously it's relevant to what you're currently doing. So that's good advice. And then lastly, Sam, where can people learn more about you? And also, I know you've got an event coming up. Maybe talk about that.
Yeah. So obviously, so I'm very active on social media. Oh God, there's my phone ringing. So at Coach Sportland on Instagram, and Facebook, Sam Portland. Those are sort of the two main platforms. I do a little bit of posting on LinkedIn, but there's some fucking noises on LinkedIn. It's weird. And they're just like, some of the stuff that I get, it's crazy. And my website, coachsportland.co.uk, which has got all the sort of some of my manuals and bits and pieces on. So I've basically, on the 23rd of June, I basically put together a summer tour of presenting, and, you know, moving into this consultancy world, it's important that I feel to share some of my experiences. We've all been through conventional education, and, you know, I may get told off for this, but a lot of academic courses don't prepare coaches for the real world. And so I've decided to, you know, put my ideas on the line. I've done a few bits of presenting before, but I'm presenting in London on the 23rd of June. I'm doing a 6-hour applied speed workshop that's based out in Acton, which I'll give you some links for. And then I'm going to Birmingham, Manchester and Belfast over the summer as well. So to put on different types of events. You know, Birmingham's going to be ballistic training progressions in safe manner, because I think I was with Brian Mann a few weeks ago, and we were talking about adaptation curves, and you know how people jump, and you'll know this, like, about the sequence of exercise progression is huge, because otherwise you'll miss adaptation twice, because you're cooking it too early. And you're underachieving things. So I'm trying to put some stuff together of that. But the one on the 23rd, 6-hour applied workshop, I did a speed seminar in Birmingham. And it was so cool because the sun came out and we couldn't access the projector slide. So I did 3 hours of presentation literally off notes. And so it was mad. It was really, really good because it completely transformed the way that the presentation was delivered, but it just became more highly verbal and coach interactive, whereas this one is going to be completely applied. So we're basically unpacking acceleration, max velocity, change of direction, warm-ups, tempo, coach observations as well, which is huge, and coaches coaching coaches, if that makes sense. So it's going to be like a real high-level facilitative workshop where you are not just going to be standing and sat behind your clipboard making notes. You're going to be on the coaching floor and you're going to be working to get better. And I've never been to a seminar like it, so I thought, whenever I try and produce something like that, it's what would challenge me, what would I want to do, and what do I need to do as well to get better. So it's helping me unpack all my ideas and then rebuild them all back up. So it's going to be pretty awesome. So like I said, that's on the 23rd. I'm hopeful, just to keep doing more. It's important that coaches can come together and, help each other get better, as stupid as that sounds, because you know what it's like when you're in that club environment. It's very insular. Yeah. It's very difficult to get out to CPD. I'll never do a CPD event on a weeknight, really. I'll only do them on a Sunday, because I try and get it for the guys that may have that Sunday off. It's the times that I could go if I was coaching full time. I try and think about the coaches first as well, which is important. So that's coming up very, very soon.
No, that's awesome. Sounds really good. I think, like you say, some of the education stuff, it really doesn't touch into that kind of that coach's eye thing, which that's the biggest thing. They kind of mention it, say, you need to work on it, but to actually be there with coaches sort of teaching you and showing you how they've developed, that'll be really interesting. So of course we will share all links to your social media and website and to that event. Sounds really good. And thanks very much for coming on the podcast. It's been great to talk to you, and all the best for the future.
No worries, man. I think it just feels like we just got started. I was just warming up.
Well, more than happy to have a repeat podcast. It'd be good to tie up later down the line. It'd be really good.
Yeah, it's awesome, mate. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so a great podcast. Thank you, Sam, for taking the time to talk to us. Tons of information there for developing and experienced coaches. And of course, if you're interested in speed development, please check out Sam's upcoming speed workshop. Sounds really hands-on, which I think is something that's lacking in a lot of coach education stuff. So definitely worth checking out. And of course, we will share links to all of Sam's content and of course his upcoming workshop. But in the meantime, guys, please subscribe to us and give us a 5-star review on whatever you use, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn or iTunes, or Spotify these days. And of course, stay tuned for more podcasts on the way, and check us out at rugbyrenegade.com now.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. For more quality rugby strength and conditioning information, check us out at rugbyrenegade.com. Rugby Renegade, building machines.